All right, your boy Trigger Man back in the lab. And today, what we have here, want to welcome you to another episode of Weekends with Trigger. You dig? Okay, today is going to be a definite learning video for you. Last week we had a little fun with Storky and Lana. Lana, if you're still watching, hi, I'm Trigger. But yeah, so this weekend, a serious one here, serious video. Guy sent this to me on my Instagram. Thank you to all you guys that are sending me videos too on my Instagram to do. Some of them are just way out there. A couple of you guys sent Bad Chad. I can't even keep up with that stuff, man. I ain't doing that. I ain't messing with that boy there. But yeah, this one definitely something we can learn on this one here. I'm gonna roll the footage. Something you do not want to do when you're prepping a vehicle. If you have a hood that's sun baked and fried all the clear like this, and you want to paint it over, even if you're gonna use a rattle can, you definitely don't want to do a few things that I'm going to teach you in this video. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and roll the video and we'll chime in as we go along.
Hey, how's it going, do-it-yourselfers? Got a good one for you today. Today I'm going to show you how you can turn this severely damaged paint that's on this hood into this by only putting in minimal amount of work. Yep, that's right. We're going to be able to do this by cutting corners. Now, even though we're going to be cutting corners, I have no doubt that this paint job is going to turn out pretty good. But the reason why I'm going to be cutting corners is because this is an 04 truck with 221,000 miles on it. Now luckily, as you can see, this hood, even though the paint is severely damaged, does not have any dings or dents. It has some very small rock chips up front, which is, you know, as one would expect on any hood really, but still no major dents or dings, which makes our life easier. If you're painting a panel following the instructions in this video that has a dent or a ding, then you know, you're gonna obviously have to fill that with some body filler, put primer over it. But since we don't have that problem on this panel, makes our life a lot easier. All right, so step number one that you can't skip in any paint job is to completely clean the panel that you're about to paint. I've already hosed down this panel, but when we're talking about cleaning a panel that you're about to spray automotive paint on, you need to completely clean that panel of grease, wax, and oils. Those are the things that will ruin a paint job whenever you're painting automotive parts. Now, in order to do that, you can get some wax and grease remover and go over the panel with a microfiber towel, or if you don't have some, you can use some dish soap, mix it with a clean bucket of water, this guy right here, and then with a microfiber towel or a sponge, you want to completely wash down your panel. Now, there is no perfect...
All right, we're gonna skip past the washing. We all know that. Wash your panels down, okay? So let's see what
is on a sticker in the glove box right here.
All right, it's getting the paint coat. Okay, all right, let's move along.
So here you can see 805K dark spiral gray. That's the name of this color. Now I do have an air compressor and a spray gun, but I don't want to go that route because one, you guys watching this may not have a spray gun, or you don't want to deal with that hassle and you want to do it with a spray can. And two, it is simply a lot easier, a lot more convenient and cheaper and faster to do it with you know, rattle cans. And the difference in quality on a job like this, in my opinion, is not worth the extra hassle that it would take if you were to use an air compressor and a spray gun. All right, next, another very important thing to note is that if you do have dents and dings that you're going to be adding body filler and then adding primer, or you're going to be putting primer on any part of the panel that you're painting, for whatever reason, make sure you use the same or compatible primer with your base coat. You know, you can't use the primer, the Rust-Oleum primer, let's say, that they sell at AutoZone and the other auto part supply stores, and you know, you put some body filler there, you have some of that can around the garage, you spray that on there, and then expect to be able to spray your urethane based base coat on that. You don't want to do that. You want to use compatible base coat, primer, and obviously clear coats. Now I'll put links to products I'm going to be using in this video that are obviously compatible to one another in the description box and the comment section for those of you that are interested. All right, next, if you're going to be sanding down to bare metal, you cannot obviously put base coat on it. When you get to bare metal, you need to plan for having either an etch primer or an epoxy type of primer to put over the bare metal. Then on top of that, you put the 2K or the 2K filler primer or high build filler primer on top of that. Then you sand that down. Then you can put base coat on it. All right, so in order to expedite the sanding process, I'm going to be using this 5-inch random orbital sander made by DeWalt, obviously battery powered, but you are going to need a soft interface or an adapter that goes on this?
False. You don't need that adapter. That's actually the last thing you want to do is use that interface pad, okay? But we'll go into it in a little bit.
So here's what I got. Here's the soft interface pad they call it, or the adapter, and then the sanding disc. You get a bunch of sanding discs. With this kit, it starts.
And if you guys know why you don't want to use that, drop it in the comments early. Get in the comments early and say why you think, or why you think that I'm saying that you don't want to use that soft interface pad when doing a project like this. Let me know.
It's at, I think, 320 and goes all the way up to 3000. All right, so next question is, what grit sandpaper do you want to start off with? Well, obviously you want to use the lowest or the most grittiest or the most coarse sandpaper that you can get away with, so you can go through the job easier. You get rid of all the bad paint, flaky paint, a lot easier. Now, if you're going to be spraying your base coat out of a spray gun with the correct nozzle, you can get away with 400 grit sandpaper. Base coat will cover that, but since we're going to be using a spray can, you know, even a spray can, if you have enough of them, you can cover 400 grit sandpaper, sand scratches. But I went cheap and only got one spray can of this paint. Hopefully that's enough for this hood. I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But out of a spray can, you want to try to get to 600 grit sandpaper. So I have 600 grit sandpaper on this. We're going to try to see how it works. Oh, hold on. One step before we start sanding, and that is well, first we're going to pop the hood so that the hood is above the adjacent panels. But we're also going to cover this edge with some tape, because when you're sanding, you don't want to go over this edge, because once the tip of that sanding disc hits this edge, it's going to just burn right through the paint and ruin that paint. So we're going to cover this with tape. First we'll pop the hood, then we'll put tape on this edge. Also, we're not going to sand the lip of the hood with our palm sander. We're just going to come close to it, and then at the end we'll get the edge by hand. All right, next we're going to start sanding. We're going to cut our panel into 4 sections and do one section at a time. We don't need to push on this too hard. Be very careful of where the body lines are, all that good stuff. All right, wishful thinking. 600 grit sandpaper will take forever to get these out. All right, we're going to 320.
Yeah, 600 grit plus a soft interface pad. I mean, that's damn near blend panel sanding technique, you know. So on something like this.
All right, so here's a look at our hood after 320, but we do have a problem. Looks like we can't really cut too many corners on this job, because it's just going to take too much effort for me to get the areas that look like this to look like this. So you know, ideally want it to look like this or this. This is still your base coat, but obviously you've sanded out the clear coat. So this is a good, you know, base or foundation to put the new base coat on. So is this. This is still the primer sealer that's under the base coat. But this obviously is not a good foundation to put your new base coat on. I mean, you could do it, but you know, it's gonna flake off. It's just, even though this is a cheap car, I don't care much about it, but still I don't want to put the base coat on this. So I'm going to go over this with some 240 grit sanding discs. I also have 180 sanding discs if that doesn't cut it, which I think should cut it, to get rid of all this area. And then over this, I'm going to just spray primer on it. I don't have a choice, but you know, you can spray primer on it, but then that cuts down on your time of sanding and bringing the 240 grit sanding scratches to 600. You spray the primer on it, and then you simply go in with 600 grit sanding paper, and then you're ready to paint. All right, so after about 20 minutes, here's how things look after 240 grit sanding. One area right here, we went down to bare metal because I'm assuming there's a high spot here for whatever reason, and that's the peak of it. So, you know, we went over this, we went through it, went to bare metal, no problem. We're going to be putting some self-etching primer there. But also, my bad, in this area, remember how I told you earlier not to go over the body lines? Well, it turns out you need to listen to what I say and not what I do, because I went over the body lines with my palm sander, orbital sander, and went through the bare metal. But it's okay, we already had to put some self-etching primer there anyway. We'll put some self-etch primer on these spots, and then we'll put some filler primer on the entire panel, sand that down with 600 grit sandpaper, and then we'll paint. All right, next we're gonna grab a 320 or 400 grit sanding disc and go over all around the edges of the panel. Make sure the edges are sanded down and scuffed up so that the paint can stick to it. Otherwise, in the future, this is the area that the paint could start peeling off. All right, folks, so it's actually the next day because things came up yesterday and I couldn't finish this job. But regardless, now we're ready to put primer on this hood. All right, so actually I drove this car around, so I got a lot of the sanding dust off the hood. Still not clean, obviously, but also I'm pretty sure we got some dirt and oil off the roads on this hood. So we're gonna thoroughly clean this hood with some grease and wax remover.
Now, the way this hood looks, right in here, all of it, everything here. You should never leave a vehicle this way and think that it's ready to paint. Regardless if you're using a spray can, if you're using whatever, a high chica, electric gun, no matter what. You never want to, like, this is not, that's nothing. Like, you can't do that. Like, nothing will ever work unless you're purposely doing something where you're just trying to make it look a little bit better, and then it's just, no, you don't want to do it. Not even then. Like, it don't make sense. And he's gonna prime it. So what you would do in something like this, just take this all the way down. I would have put 100, 180 on that sander from the beginning and just sand everything down, all the way down, even if it hits bare metal. Better than this here, especially if you're going to prime it, you're going to base it, you're going to clear it. To do this, no. The whole interface pad is not needed. Only thing you really need an interface pad for, a soft interface pad, is if you're doing a blend panel or you're going over some body work and you don't want to change the shape of the body work, like it's primed already, you blocked it, you 320'd it out with a DA. You might want to use a 320 or 400 on a DA and an interface pad over the primer so that you don't change the shape of the body work. But for something like this, soft interface pad, never.
Also, I looked up the technical data sheet of this filler primer that I have, and you can actually put this on bare metal according to the data sheet. So we don't have to put self-etching primer or an epoxy primer on the bare metal spots that we have here and on the body lines. So we can just get away with just using one product. All right, next we're going to put some plastic drop cloths under the hood, around the sides, and also up top and in the rear as well, because you don't want any overspray to get on the other panels. Yeah, I really prefer to use these because they save you a lot of time. Might be a little bit more expensive than masking paper, but you know, time is money. All right, so next we're going to use some grease and wax remover on our hood before we primer it. But you want to be mindful, you're not like cleaning the hood, so to speak, so you don't want to be rubbing. You know, you put your grease and wax remover on your microfiber towel, and then you simply want to make sweeps and do this. We're going to do it 3 times to be on the safe side, but regardless, you want to do this.
Fast forward this, wipe it. You guys know wipe the damn car off. You know what's up.
Out, and we're going to do 50% overlap. Also, obviously, don't forget to wear a mask. All right, so that was the first coat. Now we're gonna give it 5 to 10 minutes and do a second coat and a third coat. All right, so it's been 5 minutes and I just realized there's a step that I forgot before we started spraying, and that is use dry tack cloths and tack down the panel before you start spraying. This gets rid of all the remaining dust and small dirt particles that are still on your panel. You wanna do this before you start spraying the primer, and then right before you spray each coat of primer and base coat. So right now, before we start applying the second coat, we're going to just lightly tack down this panel. And I forgot my mask.
That's another step that's not needed, to tack rag in between coats of primer. I mean, let's just say there's dust in there on the primer. Let's just say there's dust, specks of dust, a lot of dust. It's on there. You prime it. After you prime it, what are you going to come back and do? You're going to sand the truck down. So you're going to be sanding dust anyway. That's almost like if you're clear coating in between coats of clear. It's like tack ragging your clear coat. No, because if you got dirt nibs in your clear coat, after it dries, you're going to wet sand and polish it. So this, like, that's a step that's not needed.
like I said, do as I say, not as I do. All right, so it's been 10 minutes. So once more, we're gonna tack it down and spray our third and final coat of primer.
Not needed, guys. It's not needed. Go in the comments and let me know
so here's a look
if
at
you
how
do that.
things look after our third and final coat of primer. Now, I wasn't able to put 3 coats of primer on all of this panel for, well, 2 reasons. One can is not going to be enough. 2, as you may be able to see, production date on this can is 06/09/2017. Right now it's 2023, so almost 6 years. The shelf life on these is supposed to be 3 years or 36 months, not activated or non-mixed, you know. But once you mix it, the shelf life is only 24 hours, so you want to keep that in mind. But anyway, it's way past its shelf life, and it wasn't coming out as smoothly as I had hoped, but still we got plenty of primer on this hood that we can work with. All right, so now we're going to let it sit for 30 minutes to an hour, and then we're going to come back and spray a guide coat and sand it down with 600 grit sandpaper. All right, so it's actually been a few hours, and now we're ready to sand. First, we're going to put on our guide coat. Again, you can use a different color primer. And you don't want to cover the whole panel like we did with the primer. You just want to put a very light coat. All right, so here's basically what you're shooting for. It looks streaky, but that doesn't matter. So next, you get yourself a clean bucket of water, 600 grit sandpaper, and a soft sanding block. Now you go to town. There ain't much to it. Just be careful again with the body lines. All right, so here's how things look after wet sanding and also rinsing off our panel. Now, it may look like in some areas that I did not sand where the guide coat is, but that's only because our base coat is the color is very similar to our guide coat. Now, one way that you can find out whether you've completely wet sanded your panel or not is to make sure you have very clean hands and then run your hand across the panel. You can do this both wet and dry. And the areas that you have not wet sanded yet, they'll be coarse to the touch. You'll definitely feel the difference as you go over it.
That's going to be coarse regardless, because that base coat that dried up clear and base from the beginning that wasn't sanded all the way down, you're going to feel that stuff, especially through some little spray can primer. And then you use 600 and wet sand off a coat or 2, or even almost all of it. Like, you're still going to feel something. So yeah, I wouldn't advise anybody to do any of this stuff this way. So right now I feel a little bit of coarseness here, so I might wet sand that some more, but everything else looks fine. But yeah, this is one way to make sure that you have completely wet sanded your panel. All right, next, before we start putting on our base coat, we need to not only make sure that we dry and clean the panel, but also all the surrounding panels as well, because water can get into those little corners and crannies, and then once you start spraying, well, the odds are lower with the spray can, but if you were spraying with a gun especially, then you can knock the water out of the hole and then spray it all around your panel and ruin your paint job. Use all the tools at your disposal. All right, so here's another look after cleaning it up and drying it off. Now, one thing to note is that the technical data sheet for the primer we just used says we can base coat this after only an hour, but I'm not going to take any chances, especially after wet sanding. I'm going to let it sit under the sun for 24 hours, get completely dried up, so that way it doesn't shrink after we put the base coat on, and then we'll be back tomorrow to put the base and clear coat on this. As you can see, I moved the car to the garage to get it out of direct sunlight, because you don't want to spray base coat and clear coat in direct sunlight. Also, I went ahead and sprayed some more primer this morning, and I sanded it down to get rid of all the remaining uneven or minor scratches that we had. Also, I put more plastic sheets on here because the old primer was dried up here and it could have flaked off and ruined our paint job. So these are the things you want to pay attention to. But anyway, now we're going to use grease and wax remover one last time. Obviously, I've already washed this panel down, and now we're going to use grease and wax remover. And after we put on our first coat of base coat, we're not going to use any grease and wax remover. We're also going to use the tack rags. We're only going to use the tack rags, that is. And after we put down our first coat of clear coat, we're not going to use grease and wax remover, obviously, nor tack rags. So next we grab our can of base coat, and we're going to shake it for 2 minutes. And then right before we start spraying, we're going to tack down our panel. And then we're going to start spraying from the middle out, 50% overlap.
So here's how things look after the first coat. It's quite streaky, but that's normal. This is only the first coat. By the third, or if you have to, fourth or fifth coat, it's gonna all be all covered and it's gonna look good. I promise. All right, next we're gonna wait 10 minutes, then we're gonna tack it down and apply our second coat. All right, so here's how things look after our fourth coat. We got complete coverage, although it's still a little streaky, but that will get better once it dries up completely. We have to wait an hour before we can start spraying our clear coat. But you know, this is what you can sort of expect if you're spraying out of a rattle can. But once it dries up and you apply the clear coat, it's not going to be noticeable to an average person. All right, I don't know if I mentioned this already, but I went ahead and got another can of base coat because a hood this size with a different color primer is going to require 2 of these to completely get full coverage. Now if you were just doing part of this, if you had primer on, let's say, a third or a quarter of the panel or hood that's this size, you could probably get a...
Yeah, he probably would have been better off, no, not probably, he would have been better off using a black primer, and then that would have covered like nothing.
With just using 1 can, but since we completely primered the whole panel, I had to use 2 cans. Well, anyway, we're gonna tack this down and then we're gonna wait an hour before we start spraying our clear coat. All right, so it's been an hour. Now we're gonna tack it down one last time and start spraying our clear coat. Obviously, after your first coat of clear coat again, you don't need to tack it down anymore. So we grab our can of clear coat and we're gonna shake it for 2 minutes, then mix it and apply it. All right, so I just sprayed the fourth coat. Now we're just gonna let it dry for 8 hours, making sure it's out of direct sunlight, obviously. And then later today, I'll pull the plastic sheeting off and give you guys a closer look and also go over some important tips and advice that you need to know if you're ever gonna try doing something like this. All right, folks, so it's about 8 hours later. Our clear coat is dry to the touch. And the final result is a bit of a good news, bad news sort of deal. So first, the good news. The good news is that the color match is pretty close. It's very close. It's really hard to say the difference. Maybe someone with a professional eye, or here's a fun random fact, a female. That's right, women can see more shades of color than men. Maybe they could see a difference in color, but I certainly have a hard time seeing a difference. The other good news is that you cannot see any of the streaks due to the...
See, if you look in there, all of that stuff that he left in there without sanding out, like, you still see it all. You see it. And every day that's out in the sun, it's just going to shrink up and you're going to see more and more and more. Right now it's probably the next day, so it don't look as bad, but you can still see it.
The way we sprayed the base coat. Now the bad news, and that is we got way more orange peel. Well, not crazy amount, but we got definitely have orange peel than I had anticipated. I can usually get them better than this even with the spray cans, but sometimes depending on the painting conditions, which for me was only putting the car only halfway into the garage and leaving the garage door open. I did that because I didn't want overspray to get on my other cars, but the problem is it's also a windy day, so while I was spraying, wind was blowing over this area. Also, it's a really hot day, so it's kind of got on there a bit dry. But all in all, this is not super bad. Nothing some wet sanding and polishing won't be able to take care of. All right, and a couple of very important quick pointers. That is, as far as wet sanding, how long you want to wait. It's going to depend on your technical data sheet. It's usually anywhere from 8-12 hours to 24-48 hours before you can wet sand and polish. Now, of course, you can wait longer, but the longer you wait, the harder the clear coat cures, and as a result, the harder it is to wet sand and polish it. Now, another important tip is that you don't put any wax or sealer on your clear coat. Doesn't matter after you polish it or before you polish it. You don't want to seal this. This needs to cure. It usually takes anywhere from 4 to 6 or maybe even longer. Some manufacturers recommend not putting any wax on your new clear coat up to 3 months so that the clear coat can cure and harden completely.
Oh, that's true. Anytime you're finished clearing, after you do your polishing, wet sanding, don't put any silicone-based wax on the vehicle. I always say 3 months. I tell a customer 3 months. Wait 3 months till you put any like real wax. You can use the Body Shop safe, water-based wax, and as long as it's silicone free, you don't want to use that hardcore wax after a paint job until 3 months.
Completely, and then afterwards you can put wax or whatever sealant you want on your clear coat. Oh, and after you polish, or let's say you wet sand and polish your clear coat until it cures fully, which is 6 weeks to, let's say, 3 months, you want to be very careful when you're washing your clear coat. You want to make sure you only use clean microfiber towels, because otherwise this clear coat is going to remain soft for a while. Even your skin can scratch it. You can't probably see it right now because we're not in direct sunlight, but I'm putting very swirl marks and minor scratches on this clear coat just with my skin. So yeah, as you just saw, automotive paint is not rocket science. Anybody can do it. You just got to follow a certain number of steps in order, be consistent, be patient, be clean, follow the technical data sheet of the products you use, make sure they're all compatible. And if you do all that, with that knowledge, you get basic results to begin with, but also all you need to do from there to land an entry-level job at your local auto body shop is a stint in jail and an alcohol and or a substance abuse problem. So yeah, only problem is this is a dying industry due to all the robots, AI, and self-driving cars that are going to be on the market. So yeah, on that high note, we're going to wrap this up. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more like it. Check out my videos in the suggestion box on the side of the screen. Links.
Okay, fellas. So yeah, so that's basically it. Yeah, that was my only thing with it. When it comes to all of this stuff here, you want to sand this down. There's no soft interface pad, no 600, not even 400. If you're gonna tackle it and do it, and you want to do it right, just knock it down. Start off with some 100 or 180. I personally use 100, and I just knock it straight down. Just go straight down the middle, and that way you're all the way down. All of that stuff is off. I mean, even if you knock off this part, the top here, like all of this right here, believe it or not, all of this is cracked. That's all cracked all the way down to the middle. It is. This is common. Like, we've been doing this stuff forever with these GM every vehicle really, but GM trucks and those Escalades, like they all have that same issue, and you just knock it right down. Knock it right down. So, that's my take on it. Like, you guys chime in the comments, like seriously, and let me know what would you do if you would do it this way, and we could definitely learn something from it. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Please give a like, thumbs up, share the video, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.